What is up guys, Dzeeff here, and today I wanted to take a look at a couple new Dimension Force cards. Now these cards will release in just a few weeks in the OCG, but we won't see them for a few months in the TCG format. Regardless, I think these two cards are pretty interesting. We have a new card that apparently is a physical version of a card that was only in a Game Boy game 20 years ago, so that's pretty cool. And also we have a new Plant Link 2 monster that, in my opinion, really brings a lot of plant archetypes much needed support. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh content and like the video if you found it interesting. The first card we're looking at is this Light Law Medium. This is the card based on that 20-year-old Game Boy card. This is a level 2 Light Fairy effect monster with 400 attack and 300 defense. This card says once per turn at the start of your opponent's battle phase, you can target any number of attack position monsters your opponent controls. During this turn, while this card is in your monster zone, those monsters must attack this card if able. Once per turn, when an attack is declared in a battle between this card and an attack position monster your opponent controls, you can negate that attack, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half that monster's original attack. Now on paper, this card probably just looks like random pack filler, but I think this card has one pretty interesting interaction that I wanted to mention. This is probably one of the best ways to make magical cylinders work if you wanted to do that. I've talked about this in the past, but I don't feel like magical cylinders was very good at magic cylinder support. I think you would be better off just playing magic cylinder in a deck. Magical cylinders telegraphs that you are trying to use a magic cylinder to your opponent, so they're probably just not going to attack until they can deal with your back row cards or negate your magical cylinders. With Light Law Medium though, it seems a lot more likely to get a win with magical cylinders or magic cylinder. Light Law Medium is a card that you could just normal summon, and then your opponent might read it and go, oh, they're trying to stop one attack and do a bit of burn damage, not realizing that you have magical cylinders and or magic cylinder face down. Light Law Medium might be able to block one attack, that does a bit of damage, but if you selected more than one card with its first effect, you can force your opponent to attack you with more than one monster, and then on the other attacks you can use magical cylinders and or magic cylinder to do a lot of burn damage. Light Law Medium probably isn't a very competitive card, but that OTK with magical cylinders does sound pretty funny. Next up, we have the Sylvan Dancer, a new Link 2 Wind plant monster with 1200 attack. It has a down left arrow and a down right arrow. This card takes any two plant monsters to summon, and it is a very good card for basically any plant type deck. It says you can only use the 1 and 2 effect of this card's name each once per turn. If this card is link summoned, you can excavate up to 3 cards from the top of your deck. You can special summon up to 2 excavated plant monsters, but they cannot be used as link material. Also send the rest to the graveyard. You can target one plant monster in your graveyard that has a level. The levels of all face-up monsters this card points to become that monsters until the end of this turn. This card is incredibly good. I feel like plant decks have been struggling over the past few years. They do keep getting support though, I did want to mention that. That is a bit different than Pyro, for example, which doesn't really get any support at all. Plant monsters actually have steadily been getting more and more support over the past few years, but not a lot of those cards have made their way into competitive tournaments. You had the Black Rose stuff, of course. You had the Rika archetype, that was pretty good. You have the Sun Avalon deck, is that how you pronounce that? But there's a bunch of plant decks out there. They're just not quite good enough. I think this card does make a big difference. That first effect is incredible. It's like a Dante that can special summon 2 plant monsters, and while they can't be used as link material, many plant decks are based on Xyz summoning or synchro summoning anyway. And while setting up your graveyard in a plant deck is pretty much always going to be a good thing, this card is obviously really important for Sylvan decks. Those have been pretty outdated for a while now, but this card puts 2 monsters on the board, which you could use for a synchro or an Xyz summon, and then it also lets you send a monster to the graveyard to hopefully trigger its graveyard effect. Most of the Sylvan cards, at least the ones that I can think of, do have effects when they are excavated and then sent to the graveyard. So that is a really good thing. The second ability is nice as well. It lets you do some pretty easy Xyz plays, especially for bigger Xyz summons that otherwise might be a tad harder to pull off. I think the second effect isn't as relevant as the first effect, but it will help you with your level modulation plays. Perhaps it's is good in a plant deck that I can't think of at the moment, but overall I think this is one of the best plant support cards we've ever seen, especially in recent years. Plant monsters have a ton of support. They have a ton of really powerful cards. Lone Fire Blossom is great. Miracle Fertilizer used to be really good back in the day. There are plenty of generic plant support cards that I think really are powerful. They just don't have a deck to go into, and I think that with the help of the Sylvan Dancer, we could see some plant decks actually at the top tables of tournaments. Will that happen immediately? Maybe not, but I think this card is good enough that it will actually see competitive experimentation, especially if we get a new plant archetype in the future that has a lot of powerful cards. Finally, we have a bonus card. This one is not out of Dimension Force. This is a card that actually has already been released not too long ago though, just like a few weeks. And this card is really cool. I don't think it's a huge meta changing card, but I do think it's a card that's good enough to be included in a few different rogue decks. I do not know how to pronounce this card's name, but it is a level 8 light worm effect monster with 2000 attack and 2000 defense. It says you can only use the 2 effect of this card's name once per turn. You can special summon this card from your hand by banishing 1 level or rank 8 monster from your graveyard, which by the way is not a once per turn effect, it's only the 2 effect that is. The 2 effect though says you can target 1 level 8 or rank 8 ritual, fusion, synchro, or Xyz monster in your graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, then apply this effect based on what type of monster it was. If it was a ritual or fusion monster, draw 1 card. If it was a synchro or Xyz monster, this card gains 1000 attack. I actually think this card is pretty cool. I know it's not the most exciting card we've ever talked about, but it's a free special summon for a level 8 monster in decks that already play level and rank 8 monsters, and it has an alright on-field effect. Keep in mind, like I said, because the special summon is not a once per turn, if you do happen to draw multiple copies of this card, you are allowed to keep special summoning them as long as you have level or rank 8 monsters in the graveyard to keep banishing. I think the on-field effect is pretty good for ritual or fusion monsters, and I think you could theoretically play this in a ritual deck. It wouldn't be too difficult. There are plenty of rituals out there that would probably try to play this card. Chaos Max comes to mind, so clearly I'm not talking about a competitive deck here, but I think this card would be alright in a Chaos Max deck. It's just a card that seems pretty good on paper, and I think if you spent enough time, you probably could find a few decks that this card could work in. Let me know in the comment section below what you think this card could go into, because at the moment I am mostly just thinking about Chaos Max, and that's obviously not a very competitive deck. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about Dimension Force so far. We have covered a lot of cards from that set. Not all of them, of course, but I have tried to cover as many as possible. I'll see you later though. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.